Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the Improvisational Storytelling Podcast, where every week a few friends get together with their randomly designed and randomly assigned story elements. We combine them together and make a story that you would want to write a fan fiction about. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. I had Ka-Tet members. What did you guys have?
I have Hero Sidekick.
And I have Magic System.
Magic System. That sounds like a good place to start. Should we start with that, Seth?
Yes. Is this a continuation of last week, or is this something completely new?
I don't know. It's something completely new.
Oh, okay, cool.
What?
I thought it was going to be episode 3, but...
Okay, Reed, give us a recap then.
No, I'd rather have it be something brand new, to be honest. I thought we had we were at a spot where there was more story to tell.
All right, yeah, no, that's fine. I'll go ahead with the Magic System. Just repurpose it a little bit. So the Magic System is kind of like an order of, they're not like they're wizards, but not necessarily like an innate ability that you're born with, but you'd say he can be taught it, but like an order that's kind of throughout this world, and they're it's all about binding. So like these people would perform marriages. They're also kind of like a scientific community group. So like we would look at like GMO foods, where like they're
right.
Like I've seen it where they've like grown apples on grapevines, and then they actually taste like you're eating a giant grape, but it's an apple. Have you ever had that?
I have never had one, but I've heard of that.
Yeah, so it's stuff like that, like even what is it? Like hybrid kind of stuff, where it's like real, like broccoli is really a hybrid between, I think it's like Brussels sprouts and cauliflower. It's not a real thing, but they basically put it together by like splicing it together. So basically, these binders work very much in these ways. Like basically, like what they tie together doesn't come apart, and so they find themselves in like a lot of different like areas. Where like, let's say you adopt a puppy and you want it to, let's say, bond to a certain person, so you bring it to the binder, and then they actually can make that, the puppy bond to one particular person or a group of people, or kind of like making it an assigned ownership.
Yeah. And this isn't just like legally binding, like they somehow physically, spiritually, magically binding as well.
Right. It's like they actually connect. So like in a marriage, they'll like conduct the marriage, but then they actually bind the two people together, where then like they'll just find themselves almost on the same wavelength. They just start. And so like maybe you could have a regular marriage, but then people come to here, like if they, let's say, want this long lasting marriage, because then it'll take, and they can then like bind your minds. Not like you can read each other's minds, but it just kind of puts it takes kind of the two, and like with like, let's say, fruit or something, it takes a little bit and then just melds what's kind of the same, so that in general it function. I don't know if that makes sense, but it functions
kind of
where they'll be just predisposed to cognitively work together, be very agreeable, come to the same conclusions, think along the same line. It just makes it puts, let's say, other differences aside, and just melds the spiritual, the psychological functioning of it together. But again, they do the same thing with like plants. They make all kinds of different crops. They'll take and they'll like bind the genetic structure of different plants together to make a better fruit, a better apple. That is, you peel the outside off like an orange, and it's, all little, like mixing different genetic things together, or assigning, more of like an imprinted connected bond between two different things. That's
okay. And this is done not chemically, but just
kind of metaphysically.
Okay.
That's right.
Cool.
Yeah.
You want me to go with my Ka-Tet, or Reed, do you want to do yours next?
Why don't you do the Ka-Tet?
Okay, the Ka-Tet. Now, Ka-Tet is people brought together by Ka, which is fate, for fate's purpose and not theirs. So the Ka-Tet is 3 different people. These people knew each other a while ago, years ago. And they separated when the circus they were all working for kind of broke up. And each of them have kind of fallen into, shall we call it, clandestine dealings. So there's Catherine. She was originally a contortionist. Since turned into thief / she hasn't done any assassin work, but she's done some rogue work. You have Charles, a strongman, who has turned into the Silent Mountain, bouncer, bruiser, beater-upper extraordinaire. And then you have Archist. He was originally like pretended to be a wizard, used like fireworks and smoke and did like magician tricks. And he is turned into alchemist, narcotic creator, drug creator, poisoner, kind of all around chemical manipulator. And they separated, like, let's say 15 years ago when the circus was forced to disband because people thought that the circus was kind of like a way for thieves to move around the countryside. And it wasn't at that point, but Catherine, Charles, and Archist soon became those things as they all went their separate ways and then gained these skills, used the skills and abilities they already had to sort of not enrich themselves, but to just get by. And then it kept happening where Catherine would be in the middle of something important and she was about to get found out, and Archist was there to throw down a smoke bomb, right? And it wasn't like he just randomly appeared there, and he definitely wasn't following her because she told him not to follow him, or else she would find Charles and send Charles after him. And as she was speaking, Charles just happened to open the door to the inn across the street. And so fate wants them together, and they keep kind of falling into each other's path when certain things are needed. Sometimes they're not there to rescue each other, but if certain death, imprisonment, too terrible of any kind of consequence were to fall against them, then they would, one of them would be there for the other. None of them really believe that this is like, that they're supposed to sort of maybe band together and travel together, except for Archivist. He does, but they don't listen to him because he's always been kind of, he's been sucking on the sulfur fumes a little bit too much. Because he's like constantly in his kind of lab cabin thing, and it smells weird, and you get lightheaded when you go in there. So, he's really smart, but people don't really listen to him because his eyes don't exactly move in the same direction. He's a couple arrows short of a full quiver. At least that's when he kind of puts off, and so they don't believe him. But in this story, at some point, all 3 of them are going to kind of stumble across or band together and do something for the story.
Cool.
Yeah, that is my story element.
I've got a real curveball.
Okay, let's hear it.
This is Hero's Sidekick. His name is Sirius, as Sirius, as in the brightest star in the Earth night sky.
Yeah.
And he's an avian life form, fully sentient. He's like just under 4 feet tall, standing upright on clawed feet on the end of short legs. Massive shoulders support arms that seem too long in contrast to the short legs. Hands clawed, 2 feathered wings spanning almost 8 feet. He's got beaked mouth parts, so that's not compatible for speaking, but he's adept in telepathic communication. And the craft he arrived in was an escape pod from a crippled spacecraft from the Canis Major constellation.
Right.
And he shows kind of an affable demeanor, and he's a kind of a big hit because he's so unusual. And he has to admonish people not to just think all over the place, but to like focus their thoughts so that he doesn't go crazy trying to understand them.
Right.
And he sings. He sings beautifully. People love to listen to him sing. And he makes another noise that he claims is laughter. And he's got a great sense of humor. And he's just totally amused by these human, mammal, biped creatures that have actually really interesting thoughts. And he's curious. He's intelligent. He's interested in ethics. So he's always asking, like, well, how do you decide what's the best thing to do? And,
right.
And how are you related to each other? And then this whole notion of, trying to understand these binders, they've got these ceremonies, like they're kind of in charge of the official kinds of social structure things that go on, and he's fascinated by that. And so he's just kind of checking the place out. He doesn't, his escape pod, is not something that can be used for any kind of return flight. The spacecraft, he doesn't know what happened to his compatriots, so he doesn't know how, communications, he hasn't got that figured out. I'm not sure what kind of level of technology we're even dealing with here.
So he's been lost for a while then.
Yes, and he's really a hit because he's so unusual, and he has this, because he can communicate telepathically, he can curve around people's fears and thoughts and put people at ease. And he doesn't seem to be in the least bit hostile.
Right, so we don't know who the hero is yet, but once we know who the hero is, then he will, I'm guessing, essentially put himself up as the hero's sidekick. Right,
because he's interested in ethics. That's his kind of his main philosophy, and ethics is kind of his main passions. And whatever's happening on this world, he wants the best outcomes for the greatest number of people. And so he'll be looking for somebody that's going to be about something good to attach himself to.
So automatically we assume then that he views good as what's going to keep the people of the world alive.
Well, there'll be that. And
so he's really adopted the ethics of the world then. He doesn't have ethics separate from the world.
Yeah, he definitely has his own views of right and wrong, and that's why he's interested in the subject. And he's very curious about how a whole planet, a whole civilization works together.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, already I'm seeing the possibility for interesting enemies, unbinders, promise breakers, people who intentionally don't make promises or intentionally break promises, contract tear-uppers.
Yeah.
Unless the magic system is a way to control people, and the whole idea of binding is that humans the people have to stay bound,
I guess just in like what you started saying, I kind of like the idea of like an almost subset, where if there's some kind of the magic or power behind the binding, I wouldn't think of it in like a bad way. Of course, it's because it's my idea, but not necessarily because of that. But like if you unbind it, like if you have someone that unbinds it, like it almost be like taking a drug. And so you have, let's say, this group of people that like they get addicted to unbinding their promises, unbinding their treaties, unbinding the connections around them, because
right.
then they can suck off of it like it's like I don't know, taking a shot of cocaine or something.
Because there's like a lot of energy that gets released. Is that the idea?
Yeah, but it's like it'll give you like a spiked high for a while.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does kind of make some sense.
It's something that like most people don't realize you can unbind, but you do have, let's say, a group of people that like they get off by like breaking promises, like breaking treaties, breaking what holds things together around them, partly with these these binders, because if they can basically unravel what they've put together, it gives
so
them
the idea being is that the binders, maybe the magic, they put a little bit of the magic in between the two people or the person's contract.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tap into that and get a little hit off of that magic that goes in between by either participating in or by breaking your own sort of secret. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Kind of.
I was just thinking, this makes me think of the Lightbringer series. And part of the Lightbringer series has this concept that if you can't draft light, if you can't wield magic good enough to get a stable result, you can put your will into it to make it happen, right? You can basically force it by how strong your character is. And this works a lot of times. It doesn't work perfectly, but it works a lot of times, especially for men, since men can see less color. They can't get as close to the perfect color balance that's needed. So men have to put in a lot more willpower in order to accomplish what they want. But there's also a point made in it, which is that when you make a promise to someone or write a contract or say, I will, you're essentially drafting your will into reality. And
Nice.
if you break that promise, you essentially, your will is now less powerful, right? If you say, I will do this thing, and then you don't, and it's revealed that you lied, you actually lose that bit of your will because you gave it up. You put it out into the space and tied a bow around the thing you said you were going to do and said, I will hold this thing to be true with my will. And then if you break it, then you lose that part of your will. If it never gets broken, then the only thing that gets happened is that part, that thing that you've created stays true. And if it gets broken by someone else, then you get that back, that will back, because you didn't break it. And I was thinking about this in the same way. What if one of the things that they're stealing from people, or one of the things that people like to do in order to sort of take this thing back, is it's always a battle of will. Who has the most commitment or the most will to hold this thing to be true, And they're constantly, people, especially in high government who have the time and energy for this, are constantly vying back and forth to try and make the people who oppose them have to renege on their promises, right? Because if you can get someone to renege on their promise, then their will is less, and your will has proven to be true and real. So it's not only that you're creating these binding arrangements, but the big and powerful people are constantly trying to get you to both make these little arrangements and then also to get you to break them so that they can be the ones. It's kind of like how serotonin works in the brain. It's like the more serotonin you get, the more likely it is you'll get serotonin again.
Okay.
So if you get a hit of serotonin and you move forward, you're more likely to get serotonin again. If you don't get serotonin, you're a lot less likely to ever get another serotonin hit.
Yeah.
And it's that same kind of, maybe that's the kind of high that they're looking for, is that like vindication that their will was stronger. So it's like this constant fight of wills. It seems kind of like a bastardization of what the wizards or the binders originally were meant to do and do, but people be messing things up since the beginning of time, so yeah. That's okay.
I kind of like the idea though of this thing, like I see kind of an agrarian pre-industrial revolution kind of society where you're like, we're binding animals like draft horses, for example, and
right.
and husbandry, herds of cattle or whatnot, and the agriculture,
right.
labor-intensive
right.
kinds of agriculture with that makes great use of animals, and the industry rises up around crafts and things that are necessary to get the farm work done, but it's not focused on so much technological advancement.
Right.
As they're focusing their scientific interest in the crafting of new plant and food sources and new fodder for the animals and
Right. Different types of animals.
right.
I could see a world where arranged marriage is always the thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's like my father was bound to his wife when they were infants.
Yeah.
His father's father, his father's father, his father's father. My marriage was on the books, bound before I was even conceived.
Yeah. Right.
You know, I never knew a world where I had a choice about who it was that I was going to marry.
Yeah. I think about the little farming town I grew up in. One of my parents' best friends was a farmer, and his dad, he took over the farm for his dad when his dad was kind of too broke down to work all the time. So he and his mom, they had a house in town, but he would come out there and help, with stuff, especially in the shop and with the machines and stuff. And the son just married the farmer up the way, had a couple of daughters, and he married the oldest daughter. And that guy had been, working himself, it was hard work, trying to do a farm with a couple of daughters that weren't predisposed to be much help with the outside work. So he just married the daughter and like doubled the size of the farm. It just seemed to work the best for everybody.
Right. But this would kind of be, and I want to be really careful because I think that the story we would benefit a lot from being presented with the idea of arranged marriages.
Yeah.
Not from and I hated it. I hated that I had an arranged marriage.
Oh yeah.
But this is our culture. This is the way things work.
It is the tie that binds.
Yeah, the idea of love in marriage was more like mutual support.
Right.
It's like we're both dedicated, but these sorts of things, they happen after you married.
Yeah, and everybody does their duty. Like that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Like what's expected of me? What's going to make my world work? Well, if I get the things done that makes the best good for my people, that's going to be the best thing. And in the course of that, mutual respect, admiration, trust builds up.
Right. Exactly. Builds up, and then some facsimile of romance and love can blossom from that. But I want to be really careful, even though I don't necessarily believe in arranged marriages. I just want to be really careful because I really like the idea of presenting a sort of a culture so completely different. You and I were talking about this earlier, Reed.
Yeah.
A culture so completely different than one that we accept in our brains that forces the reader to say, oh, things aren't the same as what happens in my brain everywhere on Earth all the time.
Right. And that's why I like just interjecting Sirius. I mean, he's avian. He's not a mammal. I mean, he's a bird. I mean, he's a mammal. He's warm-blooded and everything. But what I'm saying is that it's just an entirely different approach to life.
Right. And so maybe most of the story or a lot of the story is posted through his eyes as he's kind of watching the strange mating rituals and the strange cultural rituals, which for him are completely different, right? Mm-hmm. Because he has to, on his world, he flew 100 miles and fought his mate's father and killed his mate's father and took over the nest. Mm-hmm. And had 600 children in 2 years, mm-hmm. and then left to go explore the universe.
Yeah.
Right? That was like his total and complete mating. It was like necessity. Go, fight, mate. I was going to use the other F word, but I can't do that. Fight, mate, leave.
Yeah.
Like that's the culmination of his my responsibility.
Yeah.
You know?
So he's getting to know this new society, right? And then he comes across a poultry farm where there are like thousands of chickens laying eggs. And, these guys that are the binders, they've got this whole thing working really well. And he's a little bit horrified, because of just sort of, a predisposition toward these creatures don't even fly. What do they have wings for?
Right.
And like you eat their eggs, he loves certain parts of the fare that are available, and enjoying the new experience, but eggs just not one of them.
So what I'm kind of feeling here is maybe I'm trying to think of, because I was thinking of the Ka-Tet and how they kind of always come back to each other. Yeah. And I'm feeling like maybe their parents or their grandparents were bound together.
That makes sense.
In some way. Maybe like a prophecy, or what I was kind of thinking is that these wizards, these binders, have found like a fountain of fate.
Right.
Right? Or they've like tapped into ley lines, or somehow been able to kind of twist and connect people together and things together in ways that aren't normal, right?
Yeah.
To the place that they've, like, Ka itself, fate itself is putting these three together.
Yeah.
And that's not just like magic. That's like the cosmic force of fate and destiny. Somehow these binders are able to control, or maybe not control, but make a facsimile of control even there. What do you think about that, Seth?
So as far as in they can, let's say, arrange fate, or that they can basically, like you said, like read the ley lines and basically make a connection between like the above and the below, the unseen to the seen. So like they can look down like a quarter and say, okay, this is the perfect match. Joe marries Sally. This, we can see the line that this fruit is inadequate over the next 150 years of just production. It needs a vibrant life into it, and this fruit has what it is, and we bind these together, and it makes, like, are they just seen and then basically bringing fate into reality?
Part of me was thinking that either that, or so in the Dune series, there's this idea of prescient memories, right? That a person could basically see all of the possibilities for their current space and time, right? It's how the Spacing Guild is able to travel faster than light, because they can see all the possibilities of where everything is moving and move the ship between the stars in order to travel. It's how one of the main characters kind of knows the future, but is kind of remembering the future. It could be something like that, where they kind of look at two things and they see all the possibilities that those two things could have, and they choose the one, and they can kind of see the place in which they would fit together, and they're able to sort of bind them together in a way. So they would look at, infants. So it's like 3 boys and 5 girls were born over the winter, and they would come, right? And they would bring all the boys onto their left, right? And all the girls onto their left. And they would sit there and they would basically read each child's history and future, consume all of who they were, and then look at the possibility of all of these children binding together and which one would be the most efficient, and basically say these two are the ones who are supposed to be together. And they aren't. Maybe they are doing some special binding, but maybe it's just they're able to see the two people who would be bound together the best. And then culture and everything takes control and does the like 90% of the legwork to make people feel like they should be together. You know, I don't know. I like the idea of there being some sort of power that binds them together, but I also like the idea being that they're not just kind of like saying, "Oh, you want these two people bound together? Done." You know?
Yeah, no, there's not an element more of what is destiny doing here rather than us presuming to force destiny.
Or what is destiny doing here? We can actually see it. I can actually open my eyes and see what destiny is doing, and I can kind of twist it just a little bit.
I'm just having images.
I can kind of twist it just a little bit to get them to go together.
I'm having images from the Fiddler on the Roof and the matchmaker, make me a match. You know, but the whole idea is that, you know, you make good matches for your children so that the community can function. You know, this would be a good match for this one. You know, she's a sturdy girl and he'll bear him a lot of sons for working on his farm. Or, you know, and I don't mean to be so crass as that, but, you know, the culture has like literally a wise woman whose job it is to make sure that the right matches take place.
Right. So I think maybe what it is they can look down, let's say the ley lines or the corridors of fate, and they, in one part, help direct or lay along what should be done for the best outcome. And part of their magic or binding basically helps lock something into that path that it should take for the best outcome, or the best outcome that they're kind of looking down and seeing.
It could be something kind of like a quantum entanglement, something kind of like a binding based on what they can see happening, you know?
I'm seeing Merlin living backwards and remembering the future.
Yeah. I'm seeing like someone looking at two things and watching as like 100 different possibilities of the person's life kind of flash on two sides. And they can see that, but what their power is that they can put a stamp when those two things match together.
Mm-hmm.
And when it matches together, how they want it to match together, because it can match together how they don't want it as well. But if it matches together how they want it to match together, they can, boom, put a stamp, and it like solidifies that possibility. And that's how they kind of control fate. You know, with animals, it's really easy. You know, you get basically a bit of incense, you know, that you have to burn whenever you get new chickens.
Right.
Right. And then you go in when you get new chickens and you say the words, right? And you burn the incense and there's a bunch of new chicks, and it like programs all their brains to be in sync with you, and they're your chickens now.
Yeah.
You know? Dogs, a little bit harder because dogs have a bit more will, right? They have a bit more future. So you have to be a little bit more. Humans being the hardest of all because they are, you know, they have more will. You know, they live the longest as far as human beings go. You know, they live the longest as far as like animals you would see go. And so it's much harder to bind a person to each other, to another person, which is why you can't just use incense. You know? You can loosely bind a person to each other, you know, like when you get a job at the mill, you don't get bound to the mill, to the mill, whoever runs the mill, but he might have like an apron that you put on.
Yeah.
Right. And you put this apron on and it has the mill's insignia on it. And part of that contract like weighs into your psyche, and you are under his servitude and you're bound to him for that time until you take the apron off, and then you're fine. You know, so it's like these varying degrees. It's partially this quantum entanglement, partially this fate sealing, and partially just kind of like, dare I say, cultural brainwash, or just not brainwash necessarily, mostly just culture. Just kind of enforcing these realities that everyone's been feeling. That there's physical realities for, but not everyone necessarily feels 100% of the physical ones, but it's kind of culturally enforced, and therefore everyone experiences it in some way. Should we take this into another episode?
I think so.
Yeah.
Great. Let's do that, because I'm excited, because I think that this has some cool potential once we get introduced to the hero and the villain and all that. And then the hero sidekick gets to take his place as sidekick. If you like this first episode of this new first series, send me an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you thought that it was great and good and you want to hear another, at me on Twitter at @GetsBetterCast. If you didn't like it or you don't want to hear another, tell your friends about it, because, who knows, they might like it. But you could also just wait, because it does get better.